Hello, welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions. Okay, I'm so excited for this. I'm going to start by saying Standards Australia turned 100 last year. And I found out the other day the first standard they were involved in was the bolts on the Harbour Bridge. Is that right?
That's 100% right.
And it's still standing.
Still standing.
So
doing something right.
And there's been other good work, obviously, since then. But Justin and Evan, please introduce yourselves.
So I'm Justin Forsell, the General Manager of Business Development and Advisory at Standards Australia, responsible for bringing in new ideas and investments into Standards, and pleasure to be here.
Evan Jones, Senior Investment Manager at Standards Australia. My role is supporting Justin in building relationships, finding the next generation of great companies, assessing them and driving them forward for investment.
Okay. And for everyone here and everyone watching at home, tell me, what are standards for people that may not know? Or how would you describe them?
So standards are a technical document developed by a standards development organisation. So in Australia, how that works in practice is we put together a committee of subject matter experts, and we try and draw out their experience, expertise and knowledge to develop a consensus for best practice in a specific vertical or a sector. That could be a workflow, it could be a process, but ultimately Standards Australia codifies that into a single document. And for end users, what does that mean? Well, you have a document that can guide you in your profession or your practice, and it represents the absolute kind of peak of that, and that you can trust that it's been deeply considered and all of the factors have been thought about, and allows you to kind of rely on that. And if you put that information into practice, you can achieve improved outcomes when it comes to safety, efficiency, productivity, for the betterment of all.
That's the thing, like I've been using some wording that I'm not quite sure of, but the kind of blueprints for trustworthy work, I kind of like as a concept that if you follow a standard, then people can trust what you're doing. And that applies to procurement, applies to things that you buy, applies to consumers. Could you talk a little bit about, like, as a 200-person organization?
Circa.
Yes.
A bit more, but yeah.
It's that, and as a not-for-profit as well, so
That's
independent of government.
That's right.
How are you kind of helping Australian companies?
I think what's important, what Evan raised earlier, is that standards is fundamentally about safety. It's about productivity. It's about efficiency. It's about sustainability, and it's best practice across the board. A standard is almost opposite to a patent. Right? Patents are exclusive, and the patent owner, tries to protect its IP. Standards is the opposite. It's the best minds in Australia and the world coming together to come up with something that can be really trusted and shared very widely with all organisations and individuals in our nation to do things in a safe, better, smarter, faster way. So that trust, I think, is one of our most important values at Standards.
So good for companies doing business, but good for consumers as well. Probably makes, if I'm thinking about Australian startups and the advantage that they have, being able to say we're doing this high quality thing that's compliant with this standard is potentially a competitive advantage.
Absolutely. I mean, would you buy a child safety seat for your own child that is not standards approved? You might, but who would do that, honestly? The reason why buildings in Australia generally don't fall down, unlike other countries, is that our standards are really high quality and people follow them. And when they do, we know the outcome is strong, and you can rely upon that. When it comes to overseas, Australian companies wishing to expand internationally, if their standards compliant with Australian standards, and then go on to ISO standards, which is the one of the international standards bodies, which Standards Australia is a member of and helps the ISO committees develop international standards, then the Australian companies can compete vigorously and well internationally.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, so building on that, right, for consumers, the trust point is kind of everything, really, because standards are quite subtle. When they're working right, you almost shouldn't notice them because things are following the best practice. But, we talk about an abstract a lot, but like the benefits of this are really tangible. If your waterproofing membrane's not correctly put in, your shower's going to leak into your lounge room, right? We ensure that the buildings are made out of highly flammable materials. This is like real meaningful stuff, but it's almost there as a bit of redundancy. But, if you went out and bought a car, you go and check the reviews. If you try that new series on Netflix, you get out there and you check IMDb. Well, standards kind of provide that same function. You can look at the standard, you could look at a compliance check mark to give you that same level of reassurance when you're dealing with something that might be quite technical or unfamiliar. Standards kind of help you to fill that gap and say, okay, this is built to a particular spec. I can have trust that this is the right thing or product for me.
Okay. And I want to divert more towards what's useful for startups that are watching this as well. So with a kind of technology-enabled entrepreneurship lens on, which is everything that we talk about, how do you see technology changing standards?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's a big question. I think, the chewy topic I think everyone always wants to talk about is AI, so maybe we'll go for that one up front. For us, it's a real meaningful inflection point because ultimately we're a business based around documents, written documents, and the opportunity to be able to translate and transform that information to something new has just opened up in the last year or so. And for us, there's a real benefit in being able to improve the usability of what we produce. These are dense technical content, and really what we want to try and do is for people who are English as a second language, or to be able to allow people to carry out the complex calculations that are in the documents. AI is this great opportunity to harness that. And for me, right now it's being served by quite a high value consultancy grade. And there's a great chance to kind of democratize access to that by using AI to bring it in at a lower price point and really open up that access for everyone when it comes to something like standards. I think on the other side of it, there's also the SaaS boom that's happened over the last 20 years. It's not a space we've really actively played a role in. We can really start to introduce some of the content that's within the standards into some of these platforms where it makes sense, and working closely with the kind of technology partners that are out there building the modern toolkit for kind of Australian businesses. And, for me, it's really important that we support those businesses, and that's kind of why the fund's been brought about.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just jump in.
Yeah.
97% of standards around the world by all the standards bodies are actually sold via a PDF, which is, in this day and age, actually crazy, right? We want smart, intelligent, easy to understand, easy to access standards-based solutions to give end users, consumers, anyone involved, really fast, smart, cheap, lower cost access to the best practice in the world. And that's kind of our mission. We are trying to work and transform the way standards is delivered in Australia and the world to a best practice model that follows that sort of vision of new tech, of AI-driven, data-driven insights. How do we do it better, faster, smarter?
This is why I'm so excited, because I wouldn't ask ChatGPT to build a house for me.
That's good.
There's a trust that's just not there.
It's a wise move, yeah.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be nice if you could have that trust from any kind of AI-enabled system to say, yes, it complies with this standard, this standard, this standard, and there's some intelligence coming through that kind of evaluation of a standard. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, the trustworthy work that people would do can, in some extent, be trustworthy work that's done by AI.
Or a combination of the two. We've seen startups approach us that use AI to help design schematics, and they put in automate all the great standards to a 97% accuracy that's required to design a building. How fantastic is that? It saves time. The engineers are released to do better work and can pump through the designs faster, again, cheaper, all the things we've mentioned before. So these great new startups are happening here in Australia, and we're really keen to support them.
Yeah. I like your spell checker analogy as well.
Yeah.
The spell checker, again, you're right, it's the AI layer, and I think at the moment we're seeing a lot of co-pilots, right? And it's the hot new thing, but ultimately, is that the solution in 5 years? So something with a standard is really challenging. If you don't know the right question to ask, how do you really know like what to be putting in there as a prompt? And that prompt engineering space is being talked about a lot. I think for me, there is this real inherent value in having effectively the life spell checker that sits there. I've been working for the best part of 20 years and I still get a lot of things wrong. And I rely on spell checker to pick up those mistakes. If we can have an intelligent layer that spends its time, whether you're designing a building, whether you're going through major calculations, to be able to say, hey, maybe this might not be right, or have you thought about X, Y, or Z considerations? I think there's a real value add there, and it's going to really help to drive compliance and really improve performance, because it's one of those interesting things, right? AI is going to take everyone's jobs. I just don't think that's the case. Like really, when it comes down to it, there's always going to be a subsection, right? Like that kind of maintenance, the real manual stuff. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's probably some admin things that could be completely automated. But in the middle, there's this huge layer of productivity gain that's able to be captured. And does that mean that you're going to get paid 80% and only have to come in 4 days a week? Probably not. The chances are you're going to be deployed to other high-value activities. The solution Justin spoke about, it frees up time for graduates who would be normally deployed, going out to do draftsman work, like real boring administrative stuff, when you're at a time in your career where you should be doing much higher value learning and actually getting real experience on the job. And having this particular solution actually frees them up from doing the boring, dull stuff that no one wants to, and actually getting them kickstarted in their career. So, great option.
Do you think it would apply, or how would it apply to standards development, this new technology?
See, this one's really interesting, right? So, we've spoken about this before, and one of the colleagues that's in the audience, I bang on about this a lot, but the standards development piece is really interesting, and it can be really enabled with technology. If we start to participate with partners who are providing solutions in the space, we start getting information back. Right now, we publish a standard, it's distributed in a PDF, and we don't really see how it's used. If we can start aggregating some of the data around what's being complied with, where people are struggling, what's not quite working right, we can begin to feed that back into the standards development process. Step number 2 then becomes, okay, potentially we can start feeding that information from the standard directly out into the platforms. Step number 3, maybe we get rid of a PDF altogether. Maybe we publish it directly into a software platform. Step number 4, maybe we start actually collecting all of the information about what's compliant, and we potentially publish that in a public way. The benefit that would happen for banks, for insurers to be able to understand that, even from a consumer to say, hey, has this building been built to the best grade? Has it been maintained properly? Has the fire sprinkler checks been done? Is the plumbing maintained and up to date? There's real value there.
This one's not one we've talked about, but do you think in like building standards, for example, 3D printed houses and things like that there's opportunities for Australia to be a leader in new standards that might support those kind of technologies?
I think there are a number of areas where Australia is really strong, and other areas where the rest of the world has led and we adopt, right? I think we're across hydrogen, a number of digital twin areas, several areas around sort of smart manufacturing. We could go on, the list goes on, where pockets of Australian expertise is coming to the fore, and we could be a world leader, definitely could. And where we see those, we love to support those. We are getting approached by some of these pockets already and saying, hey, how can we work with standards? Is standards interested in investing in us and helping us grow? And we're assessing those, and we're definitely, where we see opportunities like that, we would be interested.
The standards of the last 100 years aren't going to be the standards of the next 100, right? And we've got some really great people looking at, okay, what are the really complex sectors that are going to drive the Australian economy in the next 100 years, and really ensuring that we can participate in that standards development process either locally or internationally.
Yeah, there's some work's been done on all the new technology innovations that are going on around the planet. There's a belief that there's a need for another 4,000 new standards to be developed to help economies grow, to protect society, etc. Interestingly, if any of you know of KKR, right? They're a big, massive PE firm. I think they've got about $600 billion under asset management. They recently spent $1 billion on a standards distribution company, a global one. So you've got KKR, who are not stupid, putting in $1 billion just to acquire a standards asset, and then they're putting in a few more $100 million to look at innovation. There's real opportunity in this space to transform where standards play globally, and they see it.
This is why I asked you both to come down, and thank you very much for accepting, because I haven't seen an organization going to this length to engage with new technologies that might be useful or might benefit from the standards that you have. Like, it's wonderful to see this kind of engagement. And I think it's worth talking about now. How do you engage with startups that have solutions in adoption of standards or development of standards?
Firstly, it's very rare that we also get an audience that's that receptive
Yeah,
to this
that's
message.
right.
So thank you all for coming along. There's not that many people who hear us. How do you get engaged? Well, the Standards Australia Future Fund is kind of the primary vehicle that we do our investing out of. There is a website, which I'm sure you guys can publish along the notes.
We'll put in the comments.
We are a mission-driven impact funds, right? We don't invest in absolutely everything. Uber for X is not really our play. There is a requirement for businesses to really be able to utilize, harness, or drive forward the adoption or access to standards. So that's kind of critical entry point. After that, email us, have a talk, come in, let us know your idea. I think what I would say, and the advice that we gave earlier, we see quite a few pitches. If I could give advice to anyone in this room that's doing kind of startup work, your pitch is everything. Your ability to crisply articulate your product, vision, financials, go to market, and really your ask from us as an investor is the big difference, because ultimately if we don't get those data points, we can't build that conviction and book the next meeting. And managing your time with that is just so critical. So something to think about.
Can I just add, Standards Australia is a non-for-profit. We're actually here for the benefit of Australians. And so our fund, our mandate is around what Evan said, is really around making sure we're investing for things that will help standards grow and achieve the vision that we have to enable this high-tech, new access, lower cost, faster, smarter, better way of doing things. And that, I think you've got to come with that, but also, it's like any other corporate venture capital fund. We still have to make a return for the board to approve it. So we need both. And we think we can get really good at this because we're the only fund in the world we've found that invests for standards, for the benefit of standards. And so we think it's narrow, but we're going to be excellent at it. We're going to be world leading in it.
And that's music to the ears of any startup founder that has a relevant solution, to know that there is a very clear focus from yourselves. If you had a magic wand and could have anything in particular come out of the woodwork, I know you've spoken in broad strokes, but what would you really love to see that you haven't seen so far?
Oh, I fixed to that leaking shower that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
But strong businesses that can demonstrate real thought that they've put into around the problem they're trying to solve. I think that's kind of critical, and to be able to kind of validate that in some way. We see a lot of very speculative, I've got an idea, but it's very, very untested. And I think for me, being able to say, okay, we've got the kernel of an idea, we've tested it out in the market, and we think there's something really concrete behind this. Really leveraging the technologies available to make a meaningful and material, measurable difference in how standards are used. It doesn't need to be, 100% focused around standards, but if it can really benefit the end users of standards, that's fantastic. And if it's in one of those verticals that's critical to us, particularly the heartland sectors, so engineering, construction, design, that's always going to be really well received from us as a business. The other one that we talk about as well is if you've got a technology that's so transformative, that has nothing to do with standards, but you think if applied to highly dense, technical, complex PDF style documents could help us unlock the value, then we'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dodge the question.
No, I think it's well covered.
No. And that kind of brings us to what's coming up. 100 years old, 101. What does the future of Standards Australia and of Australia look like if we get this right? if we use technology as it's really capable of being deployed.
One thing Standards Australia has is a fantastic global brand and reputation for producing really high quality standards that in a really fair and balanced way. We represent Australia on ISO and IEC and other standards bodies, so we are on the committees developing international standards with a view to ensuring that what's happening in Australia is well represented in those fora, so that we're not inconsistent, and our companies that generate revenue here can actually springboard successfully into Europe, into the US and beyond. So we bring a network of standards bodies around the world that we have very good relationships with, we have a very good brand, and if something works here for us in Australia, we are looking to lift and shift that and share that globally. So that I think anything that comes to us, I think that's something we can offer where it is appropriate for the global market, and that's what we're after as well. Not just success in Australia, that would be wonderful, but success beyond Australia is really important.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, I think we'll wrap up there, but we will go into a private Q&A where we'll get some more juicy things out. I'll say for anyone watching at home, come down every Friday at 3:30 at UTS Startups at Central, and we'll see you here. But for now, actually, where do people go?
Oh, you put me on the spot. I don't know what it is.
What's that?
We'll put it in the description.
Put it on the description.
Yeah.
Probably
Future Fund at Standards.
But Standards Australia Future Fund, if you can't find that, and apologies in advance for everyone that's going to be reaching out with strange solutions.
We look forward to it.
It's a wonderful opportunity, and thank you very much for taking the time today to share it with us.
Thanks for having
Justin
us.
and Evan.